Hello. I'm going to tape some of these examples and hopefully it will help a few of you out. The first thing that I would like to tell you is that I do not have a professional studio at home, and so you will see some shadows, you might see some glares, and you will see my back at times, and I will try to back out of the way to show you what I'm doing. But I am doing this for your benefit, so please understand that. This is just something new that I'm trying to see if I can help a few more of you out. The first thing that I'm going to talk about this week is factoring. These problems will be similar to number 1 on your individual project for this week, week 2. So I'm going to work a few examples, and these will all be similar to what you have on number 1, parts A and B. The first thing let's look at, let's say we just were asked to solve by factoring x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Well, what we need to do is factor to see what each one of these, what this could be. So when we factor, we're going to say, well, we're going to have an x times x because we have an x squared, okay? The other thing, we've got a plus and a plus here. That means we're going to have a plus and a plus here. We're going to need 2 factors of 6 that add up to 5, and that's because we have a plus and a plus. So, what are 2 factors of 6 that add up to 5? Well, that's 2 and 3. So I have x plus 2 times x plus 3 equals 0. Now I have to solve each of these for 0. So I would have x plus 2 equals 0 and x plus 3 equals 0. The reason for this is because we have a rule that says if we have a times b equals 0, then either a equals 0 or b equals 0. And that's what we're doing here. So I would have subtract 2 from both sides, and I would get x equals negative 2, subtract 3 from both sides on this one, and I get x equals negative 3. So I have 2 answers. X could either be equal to negative 2 or negative 3. So there's my answer on this first one. Now, let's look at one that's a little different. Let's say we had one that's got a negative in it, and it's according to where it is on how we would factor it. Let's take a look. Let's say we had x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0. Now on this one, I have a minus and a minus. Anytime I have a minus in front of my constant, it tells me that I'm going to have a mixture of signs when I factor. In other words, I'm going to have a plus and a minus if I have a minus here. Now since my middle term is a negative, the bigger number is going to be negative. So I'm going to have negative x plus. Now I need 2 factors of 10 that have a difference of 3. So what times what equals 10 that has a difference of 3? Well, it's 5 times 2. Now which one needs to be negative? Okay, the bigger one, or 5, would need to be negative. All right, let's change markers and see if I can see this a little bit better. So I have x plus 2 times x minus 5. When I multiply that through, I get x squared minus 3x minus 10, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm solving by factoring. Now again, I'm going to say x plus 2, equals 0, and x minus 5 equals 0. On this one, I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, and I get x equals negative 2. There's one of my answers. On this one, I'm going to add 5 to both sides, and I get x equals 5. Those cancel out, of course. Those cancel. So I have 2 answers. X equals negative 2 or x equals 5. Okay. You can plug those in and verify that they work, and they will work. Now let's look at a little different situation. Let's say, let's say I have 3x squared minus 21x equals 0. Now on this one, I need to factor out, I don't have a constant in there. So, but I can factor out a 3 and an x, because if you'll see, there's 3 in both 3 and 21, and there's an x in x squared and x. So I could factor out a 3x. So I would have 3x times x minus 7 equals 0. because 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times negative 7 is negative 21x. Now again, I have to solve both of these for 0. 3x equals 0. You say, well, what times 3 equals 0? Well, you divide by 3. It's going to be 0. X equals 0. Then I have x minus 7 equals 0. Now add 7 to both sides, and I get x equals 7. So there's my two answers. X equals 0. X equals 7. All right. Let's look at one more that's similar to this. All right. Let's say I had 5x squared plus 15x equals 0. Okay? On this one again, you'll note that I could factor out a 5 out of both of those and an x out of both of those. So I could say 5x times x plus 3, because 5x times x is 5x squared. 5x times 3 is 15x. So I solve both of these for 0. 5x equals 0. X plus 3 equals 0. Divide by 5, divide by 5. Of course, I get x equals 0. Here I subtract 3 from both sides, and I get x equals negative 3. So that one has two answers too. X equals 0 and x equals negative 3. My next video will be on problems similar to number 2.